Well, guys, we're back with another exciting and fantastic installment of YouTube's classic series, The Alt-Right Playbook. I have to say, I am endlessly disappointed that these videos, due to being 6 years old, and while I think that's still plenty relevant, and most of the rhetoric is extremely relevant and very valuable to watch, especially if you're a somewhat newer to online politics person, you don't quite fully know all the history and how the right and the left operate, and like the tricks to see and handle, and I call it metagaming. Right-wing debate. This series is fantastic for teaching you that, and I watched all these videos back in the day. You know, they were very big when they came out, but YouTube and other platforms have a very strong recency bias with the algorithm, and so videos like the one we're about to watch are likely never going to see a big non-artificial boost in viewership due to the algorithm pushing it to a wide audience, and many of you have not seen this series, and that's why I have elected that I want to direct whoever in my audience may not know about this series towards it by watching and giving some thorough commentary on the series itself. And we are now on episode 4 of the Alt-Right Playbook series now. We're actually making some serious progress, and I figure now would be a better time than any to watch episode 4 of the Alt-Right Playbook called Mainstreaming, which is actually extremely relevant right now. And we look at the state of politics right now, how all these insane far-right ideas, these crazy excuses for Trump's anti-constitutional, anti-democratic, and anti-American behaviors, it's all about the mainstreaming of these horrific ideas and behaviors. These things that were once a massive public taboo are now considered brave, essentially. Let's go ahead and hop right into it without too much delay. Link down below in the description to the original video, by the way. Fantastic series. I cannot recommend it enough. Obviously, we won't be watching the whole video because I just want to give you a little bit of a sample. A little bit of a sample so you guys watch the whole rest of it yourselves, but let's hop right into it.
Say, for the sake of argument, there's this acclaimed science fiction writer and essayist who is writing his memoir in the late 80s. I'm just going to drop the pretense right now and say his name is Samuel R. Delany. He's been name dropped on this channel before and probably will be again because he's my favorite writer. So Delany's writing about his experience as a young gay man in the late 50s, early 60s, which is to say, nearly a decade before Stonewall, and he opts to share a couple of anecdotes which I will relate to you now. One is about the time when he decided to come out to his therapy group. While being gay in mid-century New York brought Delany a lot of joy, he found himself describing his life to the group as though being gay were something he was trying to fix. By reflex, he presented himself as lonely and ashamed, though in reality he was neither, and while he did eventually describe himself more accurately, he can't help but muse in the book on the limits of language at the time.
You know, this is a little bit off topic, but I guess not really. Because straightness is seen as the default by many, and even by me, because I am straight, I kind of internally I guess, almost see straightness as a default and gay as a modifier of sorts, which is I would argue, problematic, trained idea, if that makes sense. Like, I know it's not very woke to say, but I'd say it's woke to acknowledge those internalized biases. Would you guys agree, particularly straight people in chat, that, like, you might not even realize it, but you might consider straight the default, like the expected thing, and gay is almost like a modifier or like a thing? Like, because people think about people's sexuality when they're gay or queer in any way, in a way they don't when someone's straight, because it's like expected, you know? This leads to some pretty, I mean, I can't relate to it, but I can try to empathize with it, right? And I imagine it would be fucking impossible, you know? So much of straightness is being loud and proud about being straight in a way that if, like, gay people were that, like, socially out there with it, it would cause problems. Like, everything about our culture is obsessed with straight sexuality. when you really think about it. Like everything from reality TV to fashion to the modeling industry to so much of like holidays and so much of our lives and our social interactions. Half the tweets you see are about like hooking up, dating, but usually under the pretense of the default of straightness, right? Like there's not really any like gay, like they don't clarify straight usually. It's always just assumed, right? And so our like straight people are super loud and out there about being straight. It's just not thought of as being out there about being straight. Like think gooners, right? Like gooner dudes who are super like loud and in your face about like liking women or whatever, or just like people who are super into like straight romance novels and stuff, right? Like this is, you don't even think about it, but these are essentially make it gay, and all of a sudden it's super woke. It's super like a statement, right? Like people are talking about the sexuality of it all of a sudden. And I get that that is always going to happen due to like the state that our society is in and that our society sees straightness as the default. But that's my point, you know? And so I think that's a big like internalized bias that you have to acknowledge, because it helps you to like frame so many of these phenomena and understand why they happen. Like, because for a lot of straight people, they don't realize that actually, comparatively, gay people are not very loud about it. Like, not really. Like, you don't see... I guess you do sometimes, but, like, the average gay person is not as out there about dating and who they're fucking as the average straight person is, because there's a level of self-awareness, unless they're actively trying to, like, trigger people who are hypersensitive to that kind of thing, which power to you. But outside of that, like gay people are hyper aware typically of how it's perceived to express any level of sexuality. But when a straight person expresses it, the worst they'll be called is a pervert or a gooner. But never will it be their sexuality that is questioned, or their sexuality that's even brought up. Like rarely will it be, oh, you're straight, comma, a weirdo or a gooner, right? It's never clear. It's just assumed. It's the default, right? But it must be, it's similar to like, I'm getting so stun-locked, I'm sorry, but it's similar in terms of the bias of like people's perception of sexual violence or sex crime cases, right? Like you get one situation where a trans person commits some heinous sex crime, and it's like, okay, it's very bad, or a gay person does it or whatever, but all the headlines are gay person does horrible crime. Meanwhile, a million headlines come out that are just man, age, from location, committed heinous crime. Man, look at, and you can, it's assumed that they're straight, because if they were gay or otherwise, or there was evidence they weren't, it would be clarified in the articles, the headlines, the news stories. Like, it's only worth talking about one's sexuality to many if they are not straight or cis. You know what I mean?
Back then, the word gay was explicitly associated with high camp and effeminacy, where Delaney's more of a bear, a term that was not yet in common usage. The default term was homosexual, which was then a medical classification for what was deemed a mental disorder. Queer and the F word were still slurs that had yet to be reappropriated. So, while all the words to describe himself were technically available, they all carried the connotations of the most popular narrative about gay.
Bears woo. I mean, I'd say that there's actually an argument to be made that, like, the popularity or, like, broad, like, cultural awareness of, like, the gay archetype of the bear has to be one of the biggest, like, wokeifying moments for a lot of society out there, because a lot of gay stereotypes were about, like, gay men being effeminate. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you can effectively stereotype a group, it can easily lead to illogical, negative mindsets about that group, because you're kind of shoving them into a box. And once you've got a group in a box, it's easy to put, you know, any label that you feel comfortable with on that box. And so I feel like, God, God, I just lost my thought. I feel like I brain farted so hard. I had like a big mental dyslexia moment there, like a thought dyslexia. I feel like people put LGBT people or just anyone who's part of one of these groups into a box, and it just ends up leading to them being able to choose a label to put on them and choose to not listen to them, choose to not take anything they say seriously. And this is actually talked about in the previous episode of the Alt-Right Playbook, is they love to put people into boxes. And if that box is already something a lot of people associate with bad, then that's all the work they have to do.
Amen. That they were isolated, aberrant, and pitiable. Another story is about Delaney being present for a police raid at a truck stop where queer men would meet for casual hookups. By the nature of being hidden in the...
Remember, gay sex was illegal in much of America, and I think still might be in some states, up until like, I think maybe in my lifetime recently, there were sodomy laws across America. And so cops would go out prowling to find dudes who are hooking up. Of course, they weren't looking for women hooking up, right? Like that wasn't, there's no fear or disgust in most men who are typically the most loud and enforcing with their homosexuality, or not their homosexuality, their homophobia. They aren't obsessed with homosexuality with women outside of gooning to it because they don't find it threatening or gross, right? You know, I've thought for a while, what if homophobia, for a lot of people, is basically like, it's basically like people who hate someone who likes or doesn't like pineapple on pizza. You know what I mean? Like, you know how if someone likes pineapple on pizza and you can't stand it, you kind of start to dislike that person and be like, ooh, my preference is better than yours, and I think less of you now knowing your preference, right? Like I wonder for a lot of homophobes, it's like that, where it's like they're into women and they see a guy who's into guys and like, how are you into that, bro? Like, what the fuck? And it's like, how do you like pineapple on pizza, dude? What? That's crazy. How do you like? This is such a stupid take, but I feel like for like mentally, I wonder how much that thought process of like, oh, this person has a different preference than me, that bothers me on like a primal level. I wonder how much of that, I know that's a very simplified version, but that mental tendency leads to homophobia. Like how many homophobes got there through that like mental gymnastics?
The bushes or secreted between parked semi-trailers, any man in attendance could see the men nearest to him, but none could get a view of the whole. But during the raid, from his vantage point, Delaney saw for the first time the size of the entire crowd and was shocked to see nearly 100 men empty out of the parking lot to evade the cops. In the morning, the police blotter...
Once again, there's this meme that was like, gay porn has way too many views, some of y'all are lying. Or I think it was like a lot of y'all are lying. And that is very true. Like, I'm pretty sure gay porn is like one of the most viewed porn categories on the internet, right? Didn't Pornhub Awards like literally come out with like a whole thing about how that like gay porn is one of their biggest categories or something? Like the most traffic, or a lot of their traffic comes from that. So what about trans porn? Maybe that's included in that stat. I don't know. But that content gets insane viewership, and numbers and percentages, especially when it comes to like the West, would tell us that like 1 or 2% of society is gay. But based on what Pornhub says, that cannot be true. That just cannot be true. And I guess there would be repeat viewers and like people, like if you're gay, you're not watching porn once, like gay porn once and then never watching it again. So there would be a constant influx of viewership. But man, the viewership is apparently like rivaling that of straight porn viewership, right? So that means something. Like, I think this story is a great parallel to that, in that it's like, a lot more than I expected. Just saying.
mentioned only the handful of men who'd been arrested and not the 80 or 90 who got away. Both of these stories are about how the dominant narrative of the isolated gay man becomes self-reinforcing. A constant threat of police violence meant gay men stayed hidden from the cops and, consequently, from each other. And the terminology of the era being mostly dictated by straight people made it very hard to talk about queerness without reinforcing that narrative. Delaney argues that among the most revolutionary things the 60s did to culture was the radical...
Holy shit, my brain just finally re-grabbed. This is the most ADHD thing ever. That take I was about to have about bears being so important to like the cultural recognition of gay people, I finally regained that take because I forgot it as I was saying it, about the whole box thing, right? So for a long time, gay people were stereotyped as like hyper feminine, like gay men were stereotyped as hyper feminine. There's nothing wrong with being hyper feminine or like, I guess the term would be like a little fruity or whatever, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I think when a group is heavily stereotyped as one single monolithic archetype and stereotype, it's way easier to dehumanize than if there is also a massive and undeniable cultural recognition of another archetype of person who's a part of that demographic that is so different than the original stereotype that at the very least you have to accept the range of like the type of people who can be gay, from the most flamboyant feminine men to the most like big burly tall muscular hairy dudes, right, who look like they're in a biker gang or like they chop down trees for a living with like their fists, you know, like that matters. I think like as a straight dude growing up, like as a kid, seeing that level of broad representation mattered. I think it helped me to see gay people as more human than an idea, a concept, a political thing, you know? I think it matters. So shout out to the Bears.
Of language, redefining old terms and popularizing new ones, and giving marginalized groups a budding sense of their numbers. In short, two of the most powerful tools for making any marginalized group less marginalized are language and visibility. Folks, we're talking today about mainstreaming, the process by which a group or idea from the fringes of society moves towards the center, how strangers become neighbors and how thoughts become common sense. There's this concept known as the Overton window, which I am not going to describe because plenty of people have done so already, link in the down there part. But in short, as a fringe group becomes more visible and their language becomes more commonplace, their presence in society starts to seem normal. They become demystified. Some people who thought they were strange and threatening—
That's a good term, demystified—
will start to warm up to them, though this doesn't happen across the board. Many who hated them when they were fringe will see their becoming mainstream as a kind of existential occupation of territory, as in, if this is normal now, what does that make me? But much of what is considered standard in society today has gone through this process. Now, straight folks like myself often think that greater queer visibility and the proliferation of queer language is for our benefit. If our queer friends feel safe coming out to us and we know which words we should and shouldn't use, it makes it easier for straights and queer folks to be pals. And it is true that no one gets mainstreamed without advocates in the existing mainstream, but let's not beat around the bush. Language and visibility are tools of consolidating power. Visibility means having a sense of your numbers. Common language means forming alliances. You get a bunch of formerly isolated gay men connecting with each other and accurately describing their experiences.
There was a time where social media, Twitter, Tumblr, all these platforms that were at one point at least pretending to be somewhat neutral in providing a platform for all people and groups and ideas outside of the worst, I guess, to congregate and organize and make their voices heard. And so there was some level of like, if some innocent person gets murdered by a cop on video, that's going to go viral on social media. There's going to be an outcry, and then there's going to be riots and protests in the street. Even if this group, whatever example you want to go to, I mean, it could be a racial justice group, it could be like gay liberation. as long as they have the ability to reach a wide audience and they have visibility, that is a substantial level of power. It won't necessarily prevent violence from being done upon you, but at the very least, it means that justice might happen. And so the de-mainstreaming of LGBT identity, rights, and acceptance, which has been heavily pushed by Trump and the Republicans as of late, is quite the scary thing. It's quite scary.
You've got yourself a movement, with or without straight friends. This is why it's to the benefit of straight society to tell queer men that they are isolated, because isolated queer men are in no position to make demands. And just so it doesn't get left out of yet another conversation, Delaney is writing about gay men because the book is a memoir and that's his experience, but neither he nor I are ignoring that the gay rights movement was kicked off by trans women. Okay.
Yep.
While the example I'm using is a positive one that any progressive worth their salt should be in favor of, mainstreaming is a morally neutral phenomenon. Culture is plastic. Any fringe group or idea can become normalized, regardless of its inherent worth. And for a certain subset of extremely online people with fringe...
By the way,
Pushes up glasses.
he doesn't mean that that American politics is like literal plastic bottles. When he says that, he means it's like it can stretch and mold and be mixed around and manipulated, almost like a goo or a jelly, in the same way that people describe magma as a plastic substance.
Pushes up glasses again. Just thought I'd explain that little verbal flourish there he used.
Beliefs who understand the ways mainstreaming has evolved in the attention economy, it can be a weapon. We need to talk about how a group of predominantly disgruntled 20 and 30-something white men...
This really is the entire, basis of the anti-woke movement now, huh? Just, they don't tend to swing around the Confederate flags as they do it.
And congregating on anonymous image boards becomes a political movement whose members get profiled in the New York Times, whose writing patterns are recognized by most of the internet, and whose figureheads get staffed in the White House. Where did the alt-right come from? Mainstreaming is not a wholly organic process, because usually the people who get mainstreamed are actively working to become so.
Where did the alt-right come from, you ask? Well, a lot of young guys hit puberty, and they were very sure they were going to lose their virginities soon after. And then many years passed, and they didn't. And this made them angry, evil wizards. And they proceeded to seek out the Grand Wizard for whom to follow. That is where the alt-right came from, every single time.
But people usually have only so much control over how and how fast this happens. A group expands its language and visibility. If this leads to larger numbers and greater mainstream acceptance, the process repeats, this time with a bigger group and a larger...
I should clarify, Nobleman Railway, it's not the magma necessarily, it's a plastic substance. It's the mantle of the Earth, from my understanding, that is described as a plastic. Not like plastic, the chemical polymer, whatever the fuck compound we use for water bottles. Still not right? Really? There's no way that my geology classes in school lied to me. Are you shitting me, bro?
Larger audience. So long as there is growth, each cycle is more impactful. As the bigger a group is, the faster it gets even bigger, and the more common language becomes, the faster it proliferates. By all rights, if your beliefs are wildly unpopular, this process shouldn't work. Your language and visibility don't expand because too many people don't want to talk like you or about you. So, what then? Well, normally, you either give up or bide your time, but if you have a lot of media literacy and no real moral compass, you get it done dirty. If the media doesn't want to cover you, make yourself newsworthy. Threaten to publicly out immigrants in front of a crowd, start a hoax about...
And key to all of this that he couldn't predict, because it didn't happen yet, is once they've done this enough, and they have discredited the media enough somehow by doing these things, because... this is what Steve Bannon explained, actually. He was the head of Trump's campaign during its heyday in 2016. He explained that the enemy party, as they called it, was the media. and that they considered the media public enemy number one in their entire process. And they saw the left-wing media as lazy and out of touch and unable to keep up with more than one thing a day. And so their goal was to throw out one dumb, inconsequential, but still very clickable bait thing early in the day, and then maybe three. Their goal was to put out 3 nothing burger things in the day that would be a scandal that the media would cover. In the following hours, they would do something way worse and far more harmful, and mostly slide under the radar because the earlier headlines are what's dominating the conversation from everyone's morning news reading. Those bigger stories end up being lost overnight, and they're not really covered all that much to begin with because there's only so much time to do so. And they end up getting away with dozens of horrible things across the right-wing media and political sphere in one day or 1 week because they cover it up by strategically throwing out nothing burger scandal bait in order to discredit the media. Because let's look at a really good example is Trump's felony charges, right? Well, yes, they were real. They were serious. He didn't serve prison time for them. A lot of right-wing media lied and claimed that the left thinks Trump is going to end up behind bars in prison and unable to run for president. Hell, people weren't even saying that if he goes to prison, he can't run for president. But the right was claiming if he is guilty, then he will be behind bars. That is what the left is claiming. That is what they're going for. And that if he doesn't end up behind bars, then he is innocent, right? And even though he was found guilty of all 34 felonies, he got a slap on the wrist in terms of what punishment he should get, right? They didn't want to come off as impartial, the judge. And so Trump gets a slap on the wrist. He gets 34 felonies, but no prison time. And in response, every media outlet that did any coverage of Trump's trial saw massive ratings drops and saw a massive amount of negative will build up as people lost their faith in these media outlets. The same thing happened with the Russiagate stuff, as people call it, or the Russia hoax, quote unquote, despite the fact that a half dozen of Trump's highest ranking campaign members were found guilty and then served prison time over their proved collusion with the Russian government in order to help Trump get elected in 2016. But because Trump didn't end up behind bars and there wasn't this big spectacular payoff that the media, I guess, set up, they felt that the media's credibility had been eroded. And they began to trust Trump when he said fake news. They started to trust these independent media figures like Joe Rogan and Alex Jones, and they say you can't trust CNN and MSNBC. And that's where a lot of this came from.
White student unions, lead a white power rally and leave the hoods at home, do the kinds of things that journalists cannot in good conscience ignore. And once you've made yourself news, they'll feel they can't publish a condemnation without getting your side of the story. So, bam, you've got yourself an interview. The more erratic and dangerous you seem, the more they'll want to write a profile so people can figure you out. The article about how surprisingly normal you seem in person basically writes itself. If you want to spread a conspiracy theory, send it to a small local news site that doesn't have the resources to fact-check you. Once they publish something salacious, all the bigger news channels will have to talk about it if only to debunk it. Put provocative stuff in front of politicians because anything they retweet has to be news. In a pinch, you can always piggyback off a famous activist by making takedown videos, or, if you're really ambitious, harass someone at a conference. Everyone is desperate.
Dude, this was the most...
If you're really ambitious, harass someone.
Anita Sarkeesian backed by VidCon after altercation with Sargon of Akkad. So, this had to be one of the most, really? Are we really all pretending this is real moments of all time back in, 2018, I think. I think it was 2018 VidCon, where a handful of people were invited to do a panel on harassment, bullying, and bigotry in the gaming sphere. And the people they chose for this were Notably, the two big names were Boogie2988. Yes, that Boogie. That Boogie. The Francis slash crypto scammer slash cancer faker slash shooting in the air in a school zone guy. That guy. But he had a very different reputation back then in 2018. So he goes up there with Anita Sarkeesian. But that was a separate part of this whole thing. She's giving this keynote type thing, or this like sort of panel event thing, and there's a decent amount of people in the audience actually, but a handful of right-leaning-ish or anti-SJW YouTubers that were all friends back then all got together to sit in the front row like 15 feet away from her. And these are all people who have made anywhere from like 2 or 3 relatively well-reasoned like response videos to her. Think like Chris Ray-Gun and some black guy who are part of that group, all the way to Sargon of Akkad and a good handful of other way more far-right figures. Because remember, all those people were friends back in the day, and they all like met up at VidCon, and they did this like, we're going to sit right there in the front row and stare down Anita Sarkeesian while she does this keynote. And of course, she went to social media afterwards to talk about how rude that was. And like, yeah, I know what you were doing there. That was like very much like meant to fuck with me and meant to be like a ha-ha funny, right? You guys have made dozens of videos calling me out, maybe over 100 cumulatively. And it's meant to unease me while I'm doing my event. They call that, or she calls that out. They say, oh my God, that's so ridiculous. We were there to listen to your takes and hear you out. And your response was to call us trash human beings, because she did call them out as garbage people or garbage humans or whatever. But yeah, like that whole story was wild. But that's what's being referred to here. For a little bit of backstory for those that don't know.
One at a conference. Everyone is desperate for clicks. If you can generate them, you'll get your...
Oh, you know who else was with them in that group? Just to give you an idea of how, like, tightly knit the old, like, skeptic community was. No bullshit. I kid you not. Part of that group was Sargon, Chris, some black guy. I think Shu might have been there, too. Was another part of that group was literally no bullshit. No bullshit was with them, if I'm not mistaken.
Your message out. And if nobody's adopting your language, adopt it for them. Make sure you and all your friends each have half a dozen fake Twitter accounts spamming the same terminology at anyone who discusses race, gender, orientation, or ability.
Now they've got AI for this. This is why you see so many like AI-generated people of color saying conservative shit online now.
Put every Jewish name in parentheses until everyone on the internet knows what that means, whether...
There was a time where there was actual moderation against blatant anti-Semitism online, believe it or not. And so on like Twitter and YouTube and stuff, you had to do like very sly tongue-in-cheek references when you were referring to the Jews or whatever it may be. And so a very common one back then in like the 2017-2018 era for Nazis was to put the name of someone they were accusing of being Jewish inside of like 3 parentheses. It was like they're meant to be echoes. I forget exactly what the echoes are meant to refer to. I think I remember something about it meaning like something to do with like the echoing of voices in a gas chamber or something, but that might have just been something someone made up. But yeah, the echo signs are meant to refer to that person being Jewish.
Whether they want to or not. Hell, don't even do it yourself. Russia's not the only one who can make bots. Make thousands of bots.
Yep.
And make sure your real account, your fake accounts, and your bots all talk the same so that no one can tell the difference anymore. Make hashtags and get them trending all by yourself. And while you're at it, spam all the hashtags for movements you hate with porn and gore so they can't be used.
This is why the left... I mean, maybe I shouldn't keep it on this
page.
If your words... This is why the left is at such a disadvantage, or one of the many reasons why the left is at such a disadvantage online these days, is that your average conservative makes it their goal to spend all day on social media getting gaming algorithms to try and get even one more person to be exposed to their ideas, progressives like, man, I hate to call you guys out, but you know, maybe obviously if this isn't referring to you, then no shade, but like many of you guys who religiously watch my videos don't engage with my stuff. Many of you guys who religiously watch people like Rashad Crenshaw and Dylan Burns, I'll see the view to like and comment ratios, and it's like, man, why aren't you guys liking and commenting? Come on. Like, you're watching the videos already. Like, why not hit those buttons? That's how you get these channels to see some real numbers. But at the end of the day, the average conservative online has such a personal investment in getting even one or two more people to hate the left and to prefer the right, using memes and posts and whatever means they can, that like it pales, or the left's desire to like reach people online pales in comparison to theirs. They clearly have way more desire to influence and reach people than the average lefty does. The average lefty doesn't really consider themselves part of this whole progressive movement online, or this effort to like broaden the progressive reach online. They just kind of see themselves as a single individual, a drop in the bucket. And it's similar to the reason why there is such a low voter turnout rate for progressives. You know? I've noticed that. What are you clipping, Nobleman Railway?
And memes still aren't popular? Just steal words in memes that are already popular. Just decide this means white power now. This is anti-feminist now. Saturate the web with your new usage, always insisting that you're doing it ironically, while eroding confidence in anyone who uses these terms in the original sense. And never stop insisting that everyone would talk the same as you if there weren't so much damn censorship. Delaney's experience was having few words to describe himself that could conjure images of a gay man in a loving community. What the alt-right does is shout, "You just call everyone you don't like Nazi," while their people are giving interviews wearing Nazi paraphernalia. They even argue that calling dudes marching to the tune of "Jews will not replace us" Nazis is somehow anti-Semitic. Meanwhile, they ask to be called
They love to call it racist against white people.
Identitarians and race realists. They want to stigmatize words that conjure images of white fascism, which, again, they very explicitly support, and replace them with words that conjure images of clean-cut philosophy majors. And where Delaney saw a group of 80 or 90 gay men reported in the papers as a group of 4 or 5, the alt-right wants to get reported as being much larger than it actually is. They want to draw attention to themselves by any means necessary, up to and including violence, but to ensure that anytime the cameras train on a violent act, there is a man in a suit ready to distance himself from it. To paint the picture that, but for a few bad actors, this is a peaceful movement of young, presentable intellectuals.
It's so crazy because there's a lot less desire to dog whistle now than there was back then. From the right, they're a lot more in your face about it, so there's a lot less of this now. It's a lot more just like openly bragging about how horrific they are and what they believe. Like, they're much more just loud and proud about it. And so it just kind of takes you back to a time where they had to be a lot more covert because the popular culture was not very amenable to the most radical ideas that have become normalized now. And I think in the future, we're going to see things start to shift more towards the left, naturally, and the right is going to start to covertly push their ideas again, and understanding how they operate like this, how they use their plausible deniability, is going to be a much more valuable skill in the future, in like the next election, for instance, than it is today.
This isn't simply a battle between different ideologies, this is a battle over the definition of normal. The alt-right knows how plastic culture can be. Their anger comes from the normalization of things they hate, and their movement exists because they believe anything that becomes mainstream can be made fringe again, which is why if you want to cater to them, you promise to reassert old norms. Much as we'd like to believe that people are driven by morality, most people are driven by the desire to be normal. And when the news is filled with images of swastikas, iron crosses, and tiki torches, the guy in the suit with the fashy haircut looks pretty normal by comparison. And that's why he wears the suit. Thankfully, the plasticity of culture cuts both ways. Just as surely as we can lose all the ground we've gained over the last half-century, everything the alt-right does to make itself palatable can be undone. In fact, it's maybe beginning to happen. It's going to be a long road that will probably...
And it did. Believe it or not, he was right. 2018, around the time this video came out, like in the months that followed, BreadTube quickly began to explode. Biden won the following presidential election with voter turnout numbers not seen by any president before or since. Like, to be very clear, Biden's total vote count has smashed every record and has yet to be broken even by Trump's win in this last election. Biden brought out insane numbers following this, the year of 2018 in that election. There was a massive cultural shift to the left, due in large part to how poorly Trump ran the country and how badly the right fumbled their cultural hold over things once Trump was in power. I am very hopeful a similar pattern will repeat itself this time around.
Require changes to how media platforms generate traffic and a lot of new politicians, but I want you to keep a phrase close to your heart.
Nah, this video aged pretty poorly in its predictions. Nobleman Railway, when did you get into online politics and content? Because if it was in the last year or two, then you don't know the time that I'm referring to. 2019, 20, and 21, I'd say, were an unprecedented era of growth, reach, and cultural acceptance for progressive ideas. We had genuine big content creators going out of their way to say trans rights. It was just it seemed like the beginning of something really good, a big step forward culturally, where we're seeing trans and non-binary people getting a lot of general broad cultural respect and recognition. Now we've kind of reverted back to the era that this video was made in to a degree, but I'd say even worse, where a lot of progressive ideas have been de-mainstreamed in the mainstream online space. Yeah, COVID really fucked everyone a lot. I feel like post-COVID, things changed a lot. In a world without COVID, I feel like this point would be undeniable. I think all the spiderwebbing results of COVID they shook things up massively.
Art. This is not normal. That phrase has become something of a mantra since the election in 2016, and it can be misused. White supremacy, sexism, and every other kind of bigotry are part of the fabric of American life and always have been. So even if this is more extreme than the usual, it's not by nearly as much as most privileged people like to think. So I want you to treat this less like an observation and more like a statement of intent. Whatever shit the alt-right pulls, I want you to say, this is not normal. This is not normal. This is not normal. We will not let this be normal.
I really like that as a final statement for the video. Do not let them make this normal. That is their goal, is to make what is happening right now normal, to make it something that people don't question, and they're succeeding. This has to be stopped. First and foremost, this has to be stopped. People cannot just turn their brains off and become completely apathetic to what is happening right now. We are seeing the full dismantling of our democracy and our government, and a lot of people do not give a fuck, or they even are cheering it along. This has to be called out. But hey, please go check out the original video. Innuendo Studios is making a fantastic series, And I really hope you guys go watch it for yourselves. Go give it a view. Go give it a like. Go and boost it in the algorithm and subscribe if you haven't already. And do all the same for me. Leave a like, a comment, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon to turn on all notifications so that YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload new videos in the future. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to follow my social medias linked down below in the description. And if you want to support me directly, financially, help me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, then please consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, StreamElements, Patreon, or buy some custom Xander Hall merch through the Streamlabs link down below in the description. Regardless of how you support me, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.